Welcome to the Land in the Bible podcast. Today we are in episode 6 of the Prophet series, and we just finished talking about the transition of Elijah to Elisha. Elijah going up and getting taken up in the chariot.
Direct ticket to heaven.
And
didn't have to die or anything.
The contrast between his life and Ahab's, which was cool discussion there. It's, it seemed like at the end as we were talking, like, I didn't even mention it last time, but it was like Elijah and Elisha. It was like Elisha was just following him around everywhere. And maybe that was the only way he could get away.
Oh, was to go to heaven in a chariot? Could have been.
I don't know. Batman and Robin, it had that vibe near the end. I'm going to go here. Please, can I go with you?
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, speaking of that, the thing Elisha asks for is a, quote unquote, double portion of Elijah's spirit.
Right.
Or, his empowerment or whatever that was. And Elijah's story, it definitely follows kind of an arc. You meet him when he shows up to confront Ahab. You follow him through some development when he goes off to the Cherith stream and, with the widow and all that. And then you have the big climax of the confrontation on Mount Carmel. And then you have some sort of descending action later where he kind of gets depressed and sad. And then he finds Elisha, and you have this sort of last conversation, but it definitely has an arc. It has a introduction, a development, a climax, and some sort of descending action at the end. It feels like a story arc. Elisha, when you read everything about him in 2 Kings, it's almost like just episodic. It doesn't quite feel as connected, probably because Elisha's development was those 6 or so years he worked with Elijah. So he kind of steps on the stage more fully formed. And what you get with him are just sort of a collection of sort of hero stories. A guy dropped his axe head in the river and Elisha got it back, and there was a spring that was bad and Elisha fixed it, and these boys made fun of him and bears came and killed him, and like all you get these sort of just like snippets that are they're almost like they are like little superhero sort of stories, and again they're sort of episodically, you don't feel like they relate very always to a constant arc. And he does seem a little more superhuman. You don't have that moment of like depression, kill me, take me out of here, really, with him that you get with Elijah. He's just a different kind of guy. So what I want to do with him is, with Elijah, like we really followed a story arc. With Elisha, I just kind of want to basically cherry pick my 3 favorite cool things Elisha did moments. And because some of them I'm kind of like, I read it, it's cool. I don't know what the takeaway is. I mean, there's something you could generate, but it's not as, so like, again, the guy with the axe head. So a guy's chopping a tree, axe head falls in the river, and Elisha makes an iron axe head float. That's cool. God takes care of your needs. There's, there's some things you could say about it, but it's probably not a daily application kind of thing, and it's just, again, they're episodes. And I think there are some that lend themselves more to what we can pull out from them and understand and learn from them, and others that lend themselves less so to that. Elijah fixing a spring, things like that. Yeah. And so we're going to go with 3 that I think there's a lot we can learn from, to just sort of get a general picture of this guy, who he was, how he acted, and what he did. And
so that's what we're going to be. The next 3 episodes will be one key thing we're going to focus on.
We're going to talk about Israel's invasion of Moab. We're going to talk about an incident that took place at, if you're from Alabama, you call it Dothan. In Hebrew, it's really Dotan, but but we're going to talk about what happened at that city where he sees chariots of fire and some cool stuff like that.
In Alabama?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You didn't know that he came to Alabama, did you? So
I mean, I knew you were a Bama fan, but I didn't.
You didn't know that, yeah, that there's definitely a Bible story that took place there. And then we'll close it out with the siege of Samaria and the 4 lepers who say, "Why sit we here till we die?" So yeah, we'll hit 3 episodes from his life, and then that'll be that. So let's dig in. The first sort of major Elisha incident takes place in 2 Kings chapter 3. It says, King Elisha of Moab was a sheep breeder. He used to pay the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But when Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So what had happened was, it was very normal back in those days that you had these sort of small kingdoms. These are all small kingdoms. I mean, let's be honest. The entire nation of Israel as it exists today is probably about the same size as New Jersey, So when you got it cut in half into 2 kingdoms,
Right.
So half of that, and then you figure that the lower half of the lower half is completely uninhabitable. It's dead desert. So really, Israel's a pretty small kingdom.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on the other side of the Jordan River, you got 3 primary kingdoms: Ammon, Moab, and Edom. Also pretty small. Okay. So these are not, you can take the nation of Jordan, chop it into 3 parts, and that's what you got over there. Jordan is, more arid than Israel. So, it's even going to be a little bit less populated. All the population of those kingdoms is going to be concentrated on the mountains in the far west. So basically right up against the border of Israel, because it rains a lot in those mountains, but after that it doesn't rain hardly at all. So the whole, eastern 2/3 of Jordan gets almost no rain. So the population is very much concentrated along the kind of from Ammon west. So the western edge, let's say, of the country is where everybody lives. And that would be the same back then. It's almost like a mirror in a way, sort of Israel and the other side, because that mountain ridge that runs north-south throughout Israel, you've got the Dead Sea Valley, which drops down, 1,000 feet below sea level.
Yeah. On
the other side of that valley, you have an exact mirror range of mountains, actually slightly taller, that runs. It's exactly the same north-south. They just mirror each other on opposite sides of the Rift Valley. And so the same geography that you kind of have in Israel, you have incredibly similar geography in Jordan, as far as like the really, really rugged mountains and springs and, rainfall in the high places, but not in the low places and all that kind of stuff. It's quite similar. Anyway, so 3 kingdoms over there: Ammon, Moab, and Edom. And those kingdoms are always fighting amongst each other. So you've got Judah and Israel on one side of the river, Ammon, Moab, and Edom on the other side of the river. Often throughout this story, Aram shows up. Aram was a little bit bigger. The Arameans, that's basically the modern nation of Syria. It's a little bit bigger kingdom, and they're kind of bullies to the other ones a little bit. The others have to kind of gang up to fight against them periodically. And what you see is these small kingdoms are always kind of at each other's throat and fighting, and one of them will raid or attack the other one, and then be the win. And so they'll say, well, we won't finish conquering you. We won't kill everybody, but we need you to pay tribute. You owe us around tax every year. And if you do that, we'll leave you alone. Well, clearly under Ahab, Israel had, beaten Moab and said, you owe us money every year. And it was a lot. I mean, I don't know how many sheep you have to breed to be able to pay 100,000 of them every year in tribute, but seems like a lot to me. I'm not a farmer, but it seems like breeding 100,000 sheep every year just to give away would not be a whole lot of fun. And then you're shearing another 100,000 and giving their wool away. So you got to think the Moabites were not so happy with that arrangement. And so when Ahab died, they respected Ahab. Again, we talked about Ahab. Look, he's an evil guy, but at a human level, he's a good king. He ran the country well as far as the military and the economy and things like that. He wrecked the morality of the country, which led to destruction later, but superficially, did a pretty good job. So Moab was like, hey, don't mess with Ahab. He'll come kill us, and let's not do that. And so they were paying tribute. He dies. Son comes along. They're like, we'll test him. We don't care about this guy. And so they stopped paying. So this is what happened. So the king Joram marched out from Samaria at that time and mobilized all Israel. Then he sent a message to King Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat always gets tied up with these people, and you're like, what are you doing? Just stay home. But he does. And he sends a message to Jehoshaphat and says, the king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me and fight against Moab? And Jehoshaphat says the same thing to this guy that he said to his daddy. He says, I will go. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. So he's like, absolutely, let's do it. And then he says, which route should we take? And he replies, the route of the wilderness of Edom. So let's kind of explain what that means. And hopefully we have some cool graphics that will help make this easier to understand, because I'll do my best
We need some maps.
explaining it verbally. Maps
do
are
we
cool.
need?
Maps are cool. Yeah, topographical. So anyway, what you have to imagine is, again, you have Israel over here, and you have Jordan over here. On the Jordan side of the river, you've got Gilead, which is not a separate kingdom. It's kind of a part of Israel. Then you have Ammon, Moab, and Edom. And you can remember that because it spells game. Okay, so you can sort of keep that in your head. So Ammon is the northernmost king over there. Moab, Edom, right? Over here's Israel. Big, tall mountains, big hole in between, right? So you've got, mountains, and they're not enormous. I think Jerusalem's at about 3,000 feet. Ammon's higher, maybe 3,500, 4,000, something like that. That's probably not quite that high. But, kind of somewhat high, mountains. But when you have a hole in the middle that's 1,000 feet below sea level, then you're talking about a 4,000 foot drop followed by a 4,500 or 5,000 foot climb. So to get from Israel to Moab, you got to go down this hole, cross a valley, and climb up some really steep, rugged, tough ascents. Well, Moab knew they had rebelled. We're not paying that tax anymore. They know that Israel's going to probably respond. And so you have to assume they had fortified those approaches, that they had forts and, they built castles and stuff like that. And they were going to obstruct those roads up. And you're trying to climb 4,000 or 5,000 feet up crazy, rugged, twisting, windy roads, while another army is rolling rocks and boulders down at you and shooting stuff. And that's just a mess. Mm-hmm. And so what they're doing here is smart. They're like, let's go way south. Now they're talking about going all the way south, down around. If you've got that picture of the, from old school church of that Holy Land map, they're talking about going all the way down to the bottom of the Dead Sea, crossing over into Edom. And apparently Edom was on the team against Moab, because it says, so the king of Israel and the king of Judah and the king of Edom set out. So Edom's clearly on the team with them against Moab. But they're going to go all the way, 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 way south, all the way underneath, below, south of the Dead Sea, cross the valley down there, where they're going to cross into Edom, not Moab, which means they can then sort of climb up the heights, if you would, without opposition, which that militarily seems to make a whole lot of sense. The problem with that route is it's a long way out of the way, and it's through desert. Now, these guys weren't idiots. They knew the geography of their country, so I assume that they had some sort of plan to be sure they didn't, die of thirst along the way, to get water for their army and their horses and their pack animals. But it seems something went wrong. Maybe a spring along the way they counted on was dried up. We don't really know. We're not given the details. But as they go on their way, they run out of water. And it says this. It says, the wilderness of Edom. So the kings of Israel and the king of Judah and the king of Edom set out. And after they had traveled their indirect route for 7 days, they had no water for the army or the animals with them. And just so you'll know, first off, armies did not fight in the winter back then. It was just too muddy, too rainy, too cold. They didn't do it. The Bible talks at the time when men would go to war, there's a season for war. You fought during the summer months. Well, the warm weather months in this part of the world just bake.
Yeah.
So it's hot. And to quote, a kind of a silly phrase people say around here sometimes, it's a dry heat, it's a real low humidity heat, which does feel better. But the reason it feels better is because your body sweats more effectively. So if it's super humid, your body releases fluid, but since there's so much fluid already in the air, it doesn't evaporate quickly. Whereas when the air is really, really dry, then your sweat evaporates really quickly. Like I remember being at the Valley of the Kings in Egypt years ago. It was like 104 degrees that day. It was super hot. And we hiked all over the place and really just didn't feel that bad. And we were crushing water. I probably drank 4 or more liters of water that day, just crushing water the whole time. And you look at your skin and you were just totally dry. Mm-hmm. But if you ever leaned up against something, when you pulled off, it was soaked. Because in that dry weather, it's hot and your body's sweating like crazy, but you don't even know it. Mm-hmm. Because it's evaporating so quickly, which means you're dehydrating like crazy.
Yeah.
So these guys in that hot, low humidity desert are dehydrating like crazy. And somehow whatever water plan they had made didn't work out. Now they're in enemy territory, very close to an opposing army, running low on water. You can't fight if you're dying of thirst. And it's a desperate situation. Like it's real bad. And so this is kind of how things go down. It says, and the king of Israel said, "Oh no, the Lord has summoned these 3 kings only to hand them over to Moab." So the king of Israel, who's a sinful, horrible man, he thinks what would be a natural thought for a sinful, horrible person who knows he's a sinful, horrible person. He thinks this is God's judgment. Mm-hmm. We're all going to die. That's the first thought that goes through his head, and he expresses. So it's really interesting how the Bible is so good at giving us a really compressed, small amount of information that's actually so rich. We only get one sentence out of his mouth, but it's so revealing that his response in a crisis is to say, God's mad at me, because of this, and this, and we're all going to die. Jehoshaphat, who's a good guy and who loves the Lord and is in good relationship with them, has a totally different response. It says, but Jehoshaphat said, "Isn't there a prophet of the Lord here? Let's inquire of the Lord through him." Jehoshaphat says, instead of despairing and saying we're all going to die, let's talk to God. Let's pray about it. Which seems like a way better response.
Yeah.
But he has the resource of a relationship with God. You guys going to process a crisis differently. Instead of panicking, instead of being like, we're doomed, we deserve this, things that you might say if you don't have God in your life. He's like, let's talk to God. This might work out. Mm-hmm. So it says, one of the servants of the king of Israel answered, "Elisha, son of Shaphat, who used to pour water on the hands of Elijah, is here." Now, again, that's so cool, is that he says, this guy used to serve Elijah. We could probably talk to him. Mm-hmm. And so then Jehoshaphat affirmed, the word of the Lord is with him. He's like, I've heard about that guy. Let's go find him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went to him. Okay, again, that's a sentence where you just got to pause. Because kings don't go to people.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about even in our context, we don't have kings in the United States, but the president doesn't come to your house. He calls you to his house, I mean, even for something trivial, like if you win the, NBA championship or something, the president doesn't go to Golden State, to San Francisco to meet the Warriors, or, if Georgia this past year gets lucky and wins the national championship, then the president doesn't come to Athens, Georgia. He calls them to his house,
Yeah.
Like the king doesn't go, the king summons, right? So what just from this one sentence is that these guys are super desperate. Like they know they are gonna die. They've got a big problem, and they've got one chance, and that's God showing up. So, it says, so they go. Where's Elisha? Let's go find him. Okay, these three kings tromp off to find this prophet. And it says, so the king of Israel. Okay. However, Elisha said to King Joram of Israel, "What do we have in common? Go to the prophets of your father and mother." So Elisha sees Joram, king of Israel, evil dude. And instead of being nice to him, like, "Oh, you guys came to see me. That's so great." He's like, "I just think common with you. Why do I want to deal with you? Go to the prophets of Baal. You've got prophets of Asherah, Moloch, Baal, all sorts of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you bugging me?" So he's you could say rude, certainly direct.
Yeah.
With him, not very nice. And the king of Israel replied, "No, because it is the Lord who has summoned these three kings to hand them over to Moab." So it's funny because Joram's like, "Yeah, I've got prophets of Baal and Moloch and, Asherah and all that. And we kind of do that stuff because we like it. But I know who's in charge. And it's the Lord, it's Yahweh, it's God who has brought us here to kill us, I think. So you got to fix it." So he's like, no. And I think that's just so typical. Like if you have lived your life in front of people for a long time and they know you and they know you're a believer and they know you really do it. They know you really try to be honest like the Bible says, and you try to work as unto the Lord like the Bible says, and you try to forgive like the Bible says. If you have put flesh on the word of God, as John says, if you've done that over the course of some years, people in your life who hate what you have to say and can't stand you, and who have been like, "Oh, you're so holier than thou, and you're this and you're that. And I don't want to be around you because I want to live this lifestyle, and you won't have fun with me anymore." And like people that have totally rejected you because of that, in time of crisis, will come find you. Like they just will, because at the end of the day, they know that you have a resource. Like I've had people before that are not even close to believers. Not close to close, who all of a sudden they're in trouble and they're calling me up and they're like, "Hey, would you pray about this? I know you pray. And I think maybe God listens to you a little bit. He doesn't listen to me." Like they'll kind of say stuff like that. And you're like, "Okay, I'll pray for you, whatever." But you see that, and it's throughout the Bible, by the way. Daniel, same thing. The writing on the wall. It's with Daniel. That king couldn't stand Daniel, but he knew who could help him, And so that's how this goes down. So Joram's like, "Yeah, it's got to be you." And Elisha says, again, you tell Elisha's like, "I can't stand these people." He just kind of like eye rolls. But you wonder though, like, why was Elisha there? He didn't have to go with the army.
Yeah.
But clearly he decided, probably God told him, you got to go with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so for whatever reason, he chose to traipse along and kind of hang out with the army through all of this. So he's there.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of looks at these three kings, and he can't stand two of them, but one of them he kind of likes. He says, by the life of the Lord of armies, before whom I stand, if I did not have respect for King Jehoshaphat of Judah, I wouldn't look at you." So he was like, "I like Jehoshaphat. And if he wasn't here, I would tell both of you guys to go jump off a cliff. Like I wouldn't even take the time to talk to you, except he's here. I do like him. So, all right." And then he says something interesting. He says, "Now bring me a musician." And it says, then while the musician played, the Lord's hand came on Elisha. And I was thinking about that. I was like, well, why is he summoning the musician? And you see this throughout the Old Testament, by the way. Like, David would play his harp, and it would, as Saul was descending into madness and, really sort of like demon possession, and Saul would be clear for a while, and it's funny when you think about what we as Christians do. We have, at best, an odd strategy for changing the world. Our strategy is that we gather once a week, typically. Some of us gather a little more than that, maybe once or twice a week.
Or we might watch on YouTube.
Yeah, well, I if that's all you can do, go for it. I'm a pretty big believer in actually gathering.
Yeah.
But I know we had to do for a couple of years there, but I hope that's behind us or getting closer to. But what we do is we gather together in a room somewhere. We sing some songs, and then some guy talks for like an hour or 45 minutes. And that's our game plan. And it hasn't changed much. Like, you go back and read Peter and Paul, they were doing the same kind of stuff. They would gather, sing, pray. Somebody would teach, carry on. And now we have, smoke machines and lights and screens. But at the end of the day, you sing 3 or 4 songs and you pray a little and somebody talks. And that's our recipe for changing the world. It seems like a bad plan, but somehow it does kind of work. And I was pondering this last night. I was thinking about the whole thing, and as we found out something on our trip to Greece. And what we found out on our trip to Greece was that I, along with some of our pastor buddies, have a strange sort of love affair with The Greatest Showman. I remember like one of our rides. It was, I don't know how that came up.
You know what? I learned that too.
Yeah. So one of the rides, I was like, I love the song. I forget which song. Like there was a couple. I think it was like "We Will Come Back Home" or something like that. But I was like I love that song. And they're like, "Oh, me too." And then I said something about like, we had a year in my house where my kids obsessed on that movie, and like literally they would watch it like 2 or 3 times a day, often, to the point that for a while in my house, that movie was just called The Movie. And the movie meant, The Greatest Showman. And so I was expressing that, like how there was like this weird phenomenon in my house for a while, a couple years back or whatever. They were like, yeah, us too. And so then we had this strange moment where we're like a bunch of dudes in a car riding along, playing show tunes and really loud volume, sort of singing along. But okay, so there's that. I really do like the movie too.
I wish I had filmed it. I wasn't rolling.
It would have looked a little better. Well, whatever. It's got to look. So for whatever reason, last night, so I had been thinking about like the power of music, and I guess YouTube has ESP or something. Like, it just knows what you want to watch or might think about considering watching at some point. And so, I'm bored at the hotel room last night, and I click on YouTube, and like number 2 or 3 thing down was Lauren Allred, who's the girl who sang Never Enough. She's the actual voice. So in the video, the actress is faking it, in the movie, but there's an actual woman, Lauren Allred, who sang it. And it's the first time she ever sang it in public, kind of like, well, you've all heard me sing, but you don't know who I am. Like, I'm who really sang that. And she sings the song in public, the actual singer. She's just absolutely unbelievable. That's a tough singer song, really, really big song. And it was on, of course, it's on like Britain's Got Talent, so you have the whole like, they're dropping confetti and they're like, this is amazing. Wow. And the crowd's going nuts, and Simon Cowell standing up and clapping and all this kind of stuff and whatever. There's this moment, but while this girl is singing, like, I'm sitting there just stunned, just that like a real human, a live performance can sing that well, that beautifully. And you find yourself, physically moving to music. You find yourself emotionally affected by. There's a reason they play it in the background of movies, because you can totally change someone's mood by playing sad music, happy music, fun music.
You can change an entire way the audience receives it and how it's perceived.
Yeah, just 100%. By the music you play over what's happening, right?
Right.
So you could shoot the exact same scene and play like some sort of silly music over it, and somehow the fact that it was a violent, serious scene, it becomes not. Yeah, or vice versa. Yeah, it's just like, I don't know if I want to make this broad statement, but I'll throw it out there. I think you can at least make an argument for music being the greatest art form, because it contains spirit and movement and words, and the words in music are so sticky. Mm-hmm. You know, like and again, this is something we kind of found on our trip. I can't remember. If you tell me something right now, if I remember it 10 minutes from now, we're lucky. But lyrics from like 80s and 90s music, even if I haven't heard the song in years, I'll know it. It comes on.
Or at least what you thought they said.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because sometimes you have like kind of like, you're like, well, I think he says this, but the ability, like, the lyrics stick in your head.
Yeah,
you know, and again, it affects your mood, it affects your body, you know, and I just think God made it. You know, somehow God made music to totally affect our souls.
And it is when you really think about music. I mean, I was thinking this the other day. I was listening to something, and I'm like, someone is literally just singing their emotions about something.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm kind of telling a story, but I'm pretty much telling you how I feel about this thing. And I'm just gonna. Would you mind if I just sang it?
Yeah.
It's kind of like kind of amazing in a way that it's just.
And it's all, well, yeah. And then if you think of it at a level of like, we're going a little bit far afield now, but if you think of it like at a level of psychological sensory perception, it's almost weird that it even works. It's like you're hearing e, then you're hearing then you're hearing, if you take a split second of music, it's right. Nothing.
Yeah.
But somehow you string it together and your brain puts it together.
Yeah.
And it's just truly beautiful and truly, truly emotive and affecting. Like, I'm watching this video last night, in a hotel room by myself. I'm a grown man in his late 40s, and I'm like near tears watching this girl sing.
Yeah.
Just for the stinking beauty and joy of it all.
Right.
You know? It's powerful. And so Elisha is in the middle of an army of just killers. Mm-hmm. Because this isn't really a just war, really. I mean, it's just kingdoms fighting each other over who's going to pay who tribute. So it's not like the Moabites were trying to oppress the Israelites, or the Judeans for that matter. They're just there trying to extract some money from these guys. And, so it's just killers all around with their dying horses, and all these men are like slack-jawed and thirsty and hungry, and these desperate kings, two of which are absolute scumballs. And he's in this place and he wants to be able to commune with God. And so he's like, music. If we could play some, praise and worship on the harp there for a minute, and I can sort of get there, get out of, because just a minute ago, he was like, you're a jerk face and I wouldn't even be here except for him. And I don't like you. And I don't like you. He wasn't exactly in the godly state of mind, maybe a minute before, and he needs to change that. And I just think, I know we've taken 10, 15 minutes on it, but it's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And should be used wisely, because you can put things in your head that will never leave by listening to crappy, bad music.
Yeah. You mean like country?
Mm-hmm. Whatever.
Just kidding.
Whatever.
Like country.
So, and you can put things in your soul and your heart that will be a resource to you forever. Like I remember I've had 3 knee surgeries because, I used to play basketball and hurt myself. And I remember going in for my first knee surgery, I just kept singing because I was 18 years old and I was scared, and I just kept singing a hymn to myself to like keep myself from having just losing it, on the way to the hospital or whatever. And you can have a resource forever in your mind as opposed to, which is I think what happened here. So the guy plays. Elisha is able to concentrate on God and to while this guy plays, he's able to pray now, and God speaks. And he says, this is what the Lord says, dig ditch after ditch in this wadi. For the Lord says, you will not see wind or rain, but the wadi will be filled with water, and you will drink, and your cattle and your animals. This is easy in the Lord's sight. He will also hand Moab over to you. Then you will attack every fortified city and every choice city. You will cut down every good tree and stop up every spring. You will ruin every good piece of land with stones. All right, so let's talk about what that means. If you live in Israel in the fall, the late fall, and sometimes also in the spring, it is unfortunately common to see headlines in the news about people dying in flash floods. Because the way the geography works is you have that high ridgeline of mountains that I constantly talk about. And what happens is storms come in off the Mediterranean. And in those mountains where it's colder, you get more condensation and it rains. And so those storm clouds would dump rain up in the mountains in Jerusalem and Hebron and places like that. It doesn't actually rain in the desert. The total annual rainfall, like in Jericho, is like almost nothing. Just 2 or 3 inches a year or something. It's very, very little. But the whole place is green. Like, why is Jericho green? It's green because it rains up there, but the water runs down here. Okay, even though it doesn't rain here. And so what happens is, in the middle of the winter when there's lots of rains, people are quite mindful of it, and because they know any given minute it could be raining up there in the mountains. We don't know. And then all of a sudden that water is going to come rushing down. And so, people get killed by that. There'll be shepherds or there'll be hikers, and all of a sudden this wall of water comes down. Wadi means a dry bed. Okay, so it's like a riverbed, but it doesn't always flow. It only flows when there's rain above it. Mm-hmm. And so these people will be hiking or canyoneering or, again, shepherds with their flocks or something. And all of a sudden a wall of water comes down the valley and they just die. That's a fairly common event, really on both sides of the river. Well, the difference is that on the Jordan side, since the clouds still come from the Mediterranean, mm-hmm. they dump their rain. So they come from the Mediterranean, they get to the mountains on the Israel side of Jerusalem, that area, they dump their rain. Then over the desert, because it's really low there, it's really, really hot, you get really strong thermal updrafts. It sort of scatters the clouds, and there's no condensation because of the heat. The air is rising and it's hot, and it disperses the clouds, and there's no condensation, but it's still moving. It gets over the even higher, colder mountains on the Jordan side, like in Amman, that area, recondenses and dumps the rest of the rain there, sort of in western Jordan. If you're in the desert, on the Israel side, you don't see it, right? It drops the rain and you can get caught by a flash flood. But if you're in the desert on the Jordan side, you should see the overcast pass over. It doesn't drop the rain on you, but you should at least know it's coming. And then it rains and the water runs down the valley. Okay? So it's like what's about to happen here is normal. Mm-hmm. It's normal for them to get rain above and it runs down and fills up the valleys. That's something that happens every time it rains. But the fact that they didn't see it coming, there was no evidence of it, was weird. Mm-hmm. That I guess that's the miracle of it all, right? Yeah. That there's no storm cloud that passed over, but somehow this thing happens. But again, in those wadis, in those dry beds, if something happens above you, water, it runs down and fills it up. Totally normal. Okay? Now, but what God tells them to do is to dig ditches. Okay? So what you have to think is, these are men who've walked 7 days. All their water's gone. I don't know how many days march away from water they are, but a while, maybe 7 days away from water. So they're in big, big trouble. Maybe they're a little closer than that. Maybe they're 2 or 3 days away from water. I don't know. if they go more directly, but they don't have it on them. They're at the end of their rope. They only have a few more hours, maybe a day worth of energy left in them with no water. And so what he's saying is, if you had seen storm clouds passing over, it would make sense. Dig ditches because it's going to rain in the mountains, and the water will run down and we can catch it and maybe we can live. So if they saw the storm clouds coming, it would make sense to do this.
Yeah.
But if you don't see any storm clouds, like, what are you doing? You're digging ditches to catch nothing. You've got that last measure of energy left in you, and you're going to spend it digging ditches to catch nothing. So what he's set up is a real test of faith. With that last ounce of energy, you can do this or you can just run. What do you want to do? He says dig ditches. And so the army is given the order. And they dig their ditches. And somehow overnight, rain came, or some water source came in the hills above them. It ran down the wadi, and it filled the ditches. So the next day, they were able to get water for their animals and for themselves. Now, I picked this story because I think this is one of the most teachable stories of Elisha's existence.
Yeah.
Because I think this is exactly how God works with us. Which is like we pray and pray and pray for things. And it could be anything. It could be I don't know, you're single and you want a spouse. It could be business, God opened doors for, my business to flourish and grow. It could be, I just name it. I don't know, whatever is a thing that you pray for. And I think sometimes what God kind of says to us is, well, the blessing is going to come. You have to get ready to catch it. The water's going to come. If you're ready to catch it, it'll be there. But if you're not ready to catch it, it's just going to flow right by you. So single young man, and you're praying to find the right girl and have a good marriage. What are you doing to be ready when that moment arrives? Or what I always tell my sons is, I totally stole this from your mentor because it's really good.
Be the person that you're
the person you wants.
Well, is looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I said it wrong, but I just say
close enough.
Be the person you wants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be the person you're looking for is looking for.
Yeah. So it's so true though.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's right. So don't sit around and, plead and beg with God to bring me the right person while you're, living like a total hellion. The right person is not going to want, it doesn't make any sense. And you're not educating yourself to prepare yourself to be a provider for a family. Like, you're not doing anything, but you just want God to,
bless you.
And if you haven't done anything, then that moment's going to it'd be like that water flowing down the valley,
Yep.
That moment's just going to run right by you and you're just not going to be ready to catch it, and
that's good.
And people, when they look at that moment, you got to think of these soldiers. They're thirsty. They're hot. They're at the brink. And here's a shovel. Dig. And again, we have those moments in life. We're tired and we're thirsty and we're done. And we know we should start digging. We should stop complaining and start digging. We just don't want to. We're like, I don't trust God. Maybe nothing's going to happen. Or maybe we're just lazy, I dug a little bit, but it hurt my hand and I'm tired. Or maybe you dig a really shallow, cruddy little ditch, and, it just catches a little water, and you didn't go all in on it. You didn't really try. There's so many ways we fail that. Mm-hmm. God says go, God says do something, I'm going to show up. And then we're just kind of like, And it's both a lack of faith and of faithfulness, It's like you could have done something, you could have been ready, and then your moment passes you, And there's another quote, and I don't know who it's from, but the whole idea that character is destiny. Your character, people think that like you just like, oh, and you just get blessed and something crazy happens.
There's no such thing as luck.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier about, just to ourselves about Elon Musk, like, wow, he's the richest guy in the world. And granted, being given that brain and that temperament, and I'm sure he met the right people, and there was a strong element of, sort of serendipity to all of that. Okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
But you also hear him tell his story of working, 120 hours a week for 3 years and sleeping in his factory on the floor for 3 hours a night for 3 years to get like there's also just a price that was paid, to prepare to receive the thing that would happen in the future. And the future is not going to happen if you don't do the thing now.
Well, you mean look at sports. I immediately think of Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And Tom Brady. And when you look at other athletes who are compared to being the greatest, you look at Jordan and you're like, yeah, he put in the work and his luck didn't just happen. Yeah, he had great people around him, but to win 2 times in a row, two three-peats. Yeah. 2 3-peats with a different team. I mean, what are you going to say to that? And then to look, and Tom Brady is arguably the luckiest man in football. He ends up in having what appears to be the luckiest situations happen to him. But I don't think luck's a factor. He's like ready for that to happen.
Well, so
not to go
now we're going off into sports, but we'll go for a second. Well, let's go down this rabbit hole for just a second. So Jordan, if you look at him, looks the part. Like he's 6'6", built like a Greek god. His shoulders are this wide, his arms are long, and when back in the day, watch him growing up.
When he moves, it's poetic.
Oh, it's like it's like a cat. It's like water. It's like I don't even know what you say about
ballet. It's all of that.
Oh, and he would get hit and just absorb it and still be under control. And like he's this unbelievable freak.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this or not, but when you see Tom Brady's picture from the NFL Combine,
have I not everyone seen it at this point? They're cramming it down our throats. The longer he stays in the league,
it's like that guy. I looked more athletic than that at 22. I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah,
really. And he must have worked like an animal.
Yeah,
because for him it's like. He doesn't have the 6'6" broad frame, you're not even hardly a human with that body. Like he's not that guy. So with Brady, as much as I kind of don't like him, frankly, you have to tip your hat and say, wow, you put in the work.
Yeah, I kind of just say that kind of goes to you make your own luck is kind of what I think. People will say oh, he's lucky, or, well, look at the people Jordan had on his team. And I'm like, no.
Well, I think
Tom Brady's not lucky, and Jordan wasn't just surrounded by great players.
Well, there is an element of timing. And you can call it luck if you want, that's fine. But if you're not ready for that moment, it doesn't matter the moment happened. If Michael Jordan had never worked out or practiced, he could have landed on that team and wouldn't have won. If Tom Brady could have still gotten drafted by the Patriots, an amazing organization, but if he didn't practice like crazy and study like crazy, the luck wouldn't have mattered. The blessing wouldn't have mattered. In the Bible, when Isaac finds Rebekah, to me that's the best example of it. When that because the servant comes up and says, hey, and she says, I got to show up my camel. And she's like, I'll water your camels. It's like 30 camels and they all drink 30 liters of water. And she has to, you do the math and it's like she worked the next 3 or 4 hours, lowering a bucket. And, it's like she spends hours watering his camels. It wasn't like 10 minutes. And then he says, like, you're the one. Well, she wouldn't have acted like that day if that wasn't who she was. The fact that she had the kind of character that she was willing to work hard and serve people meant that on the day the guy was there that could change her life, that's who she was. And so she did that, but she probably did things like that for years, where she was kind and served and helped and was thoughtful. So it's her character that dictates how she acts on a regular basis. And then that moment takes place, you know? So like, to me, that's kind of how it works, is that, yeah, there's the moment of blessing. There's the moment when that water runs down the valley. But the fact that you were the kind of person who dug a really, really good ditch and you were ready to catch on that day, that's you. You know, and people want to blame God for being stuck where they are, and they never got ready to catch the blessing, you know? So that's kind of how I think it works. So they dig the ditches, the water comes down. I'll just quickly summarize what happens as it comes to an end. The water comes down, and so now they've all drank, they're feeling refreshed, their horses are feeling good. They're down in this valley. The Moabites are up on the cliffs above. They've got a better position, you know, because they're coming across the valley. They're in good defensive positions. So they're near the border, right? The Moabites look down and they see these pools that have been dug. But because the mountains around there are reddish, and they are in that area often, then they reflect back red, and they think it's blood, that there's blood splattering. They didn't know they dug ditches. They think it's blood splattering the ground down there. And they say, they're fighting each other. The Israelites, the Judeans, the Edomites, they've fallen out. They're fighting each other. Let's go get them. And they come running down the cliffs, down the hills, out of their defensive fortifications. And then the Israelites slaughter them because they're not ready to really fight. They're going to get plunder. They left their defense. And so not only, so like the miracle that God worked, not only provided the food for them, it also provided the victory over the army. So God works this miracle that's even more than they asked for. But it's all predicated on they had the faith,
their faith to follow
that
through.
God would show up, and they just do what God said. Let's work this as hard as we can, and then let God show up. And so to me, like, I love this story, because like there have definitely been moments in my life and in our ministry. Like I remember when we were first working at the school in Bethlehem, and we had about 200 something kids. And so we had about 20 kids per grade level. And in kindergarten we had a little more. And I went into an admin meeting one day, and I was like, for kindergarten, we're going to buy 60 of all the books for next year. And they're like, we don't have that many kids. And I was like, yeah, but we're going to buy that many books. And we're going to open up for more. And it was because I had read this passage an hour or two before, and I was like, if we're going to grow, we get ready to grow. And because we can't grow if we're not ready to grow. So I was just like, buy 60 of everything. And then by the time I left, we had 700 kids. You know, so this passage was like, I mean, at certain stages of my life, it was like very motivational. It was like, if you're going to grow, get ready to grow. If you're going to get blessed, get ready to get blessed. You know, be ready to catch when it shows up. And so I think it's just a great one, I think.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. I think you're almost always asked to take a step into uncertainty.
God likes your movement.
Yeah, and you do, and then you have to wait, and that tension. But then that tension like builds character and like faith and like all these other benefits.
The next time you can do even crazier stuff.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's good.
Shockingly,
yeah,
surprisingly, that was all right.
We went long again, but that's
all
fine.
Right.
We talked about basketball. And sports and other stuff.
That made it worth it.
Yeah. So we got a couple more in this series. What?
Dotan. And what's the last one? Oh, the Siege of Samaria.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 more.
All right. Awesome. We'll take those on in the next couple episodes. But as always, check us out on thelandinthebible.com for more content, where you can subscribe for a premium membership. And then on YouTube, just like and subscribe, and keep listening to the podcast in all the places that you find it. And we'll see you later.
Hey guys, if you like our content, please click like and subscribe. That really helps us out a lot. And then also go to thelandinthebible.com and subscribe for premium content. If you go over there, we've got tons of stuff that's really great. We have print materials that you can download. We have PDF study guides for all of our lessons. We've got devotional materials over there. We also have every single video and podcast we've done in full-length format with no ad interruptions and full video. So you can get all of that on thelandinthebible.com with the premium subscription, and that really helps us. It helps us generate more content, and also half of it goes to help us go overseas and help refugee kids, is what we're really called to do.